Skinwalker Ranch, the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on Earth. Strange lights, cattle mutilations, phenomena that defies explanation. Brandon Fugal owns it. Dr. Travis Taylor investigates it. In 2024, ground-penetrating radar revealed something hidden beneath the mesa, a sealed cave, deliberately closed from the inside. When they finally broke through, what they found disturbed everyone. 15 skeletons arranged in a circle, symbols covering every wall, a bottomless hole in the center. And the moment they opened it, everything on the ranch changed. Phenomena exploded. Team members got sick. Some refused to go back inside. The Ute tribe warned for generations this place should never be opened. They were right, because what's happening now is worse than anything in the ranch's history. This is what scientists found in the sealed cave, and what it unleashed. Skinwalker Ranch sits on 512 acres in Utah's Uinta Basin, and for generations, it's been known as a place where the impossible happens regularly. The Ute tribe has warned about this land for centuries, calling it the path of the Skinwalker, a forbidden zone where evil spirits dwell and shapeshifters roam. Indigenous people avoided the area entirely, passing down stories of cursed ground where reality itself breaks down. The ranch entered modern awareness in 1994 when the Sherman family purchased the property with dreams of cattle farming. Those dreams turned into nightmares almost immediately. They experienced phenomena that shouldn't exist. Cattle were mutilated with surgical precision, organs removed cleanly with no blood at the scene. UFOs appeared regularly over the property, performing maneuvers that defied physics. Creatures were seen that seemed bulletproof, absorbing rifle shots without effect. Objects appeared and disappeared. Poltergeist activity plagued their home. After 2 years of terror, the Shermans sold the ranch and never spoke publicly about what they experienced. In 1996, billionaire aerospace entrepreneur Robert Bigelow purchased the property and funded extensive scientific research. He created the National Institute for Discovery Science and stationed PhD scientists on the ranch 24/7. They documented hundreds of anomalous events over 2 decades. Bigelow spent millions trying to understand the phenomena, but most of the research remained classified. In 2016, he sold the ranch to Brandon Fugal. Brandon Fugal is a Utah real estate mogul and technology investor who purchased Skinwalker Ranch for $4.5 million with a clear mission: apply rigorous science to paranormal claims and share the findings transparently. He partnered with the History Channel to document everything in the series The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. He brought in Dr. Travis Taylor as chief scientist, an aerospace engineer and astrophysicist with multiple PhDs who has worked for the Department of Defense and NASA. Dr. Taylor's approach is simple. If it can be measured, it can be understood. Over the years, the documented phenomena have been extensive and disturbing. Radiation spikes in specific locations, GPS and electronic equipment failures, electromagnetic anomalies, cattle deaths with no explanation, orbs and light phenomena captured on camera, invisible forces affecting people physically. The mesa, a large elevated plateau on the property, has consistently been the site of the most intense activity. Native warnings specifically mentioned the mesa as off-limits. Animals refused to go near certain areas. Even before the cave discovery, it was avoided by those who knew the ranch's history. But in 2024, ground-penetrating radar revealed that the mesa was hiding something far more disturbing than anyone imagined. In the spring of 2024, Dr. Travis Taylor's team was conducting routine geophysical surveys of the mesa using ground-penetrating radar. They were looking for underground water sources or natural voids, standard protocol for understanding the property's subsurface. Multiple passes were made over the mesa, with data being recorded continuously. Then the anomaly appeared on their screens. The scans revealed a large void space beneath the mesa, approximately 40 feet below the surface. But this wasn't a natural cave formation. The void was far too regular, with geometric patterns that suggested intentional excavation. The size was estimated at over 30 feet in multiple directions, and the shape didn't match any known cave systems in the area. Dr. Taylor was initially skeptical, thinking the equipment might be malfunctioning, but repeated scans confirmed the anomaly was real. Brandon Fugal immediately called a team meeting. The excitement was palpable, but so was the apprehension. They consulted historical geological surveys of the area. There were no records of any excavation on the property, no mining claims, no operations of any kind. The geological surveys showed no natural caves in this location. This chamber shouldn't exist. Brandon Fugal reached out to Ute tribal elders asking about the mesa's history. The response was immediate and unsettling. The elders confirmed knowledge of what they called the sealed place. Their ancestors had sealed it many generations ago. It contained something that should not walk, they said. Opening it would let the darkness spread. Some team members dismissed the warnings as superstition. Others were deeply unsettled. The team deployed additional scanning technology, magnetometry, resistivity surveys, seismic reflection, LiDAR scans, and thermal imaging all confirmed the void's existence. The scans also revealed something else. A collapsed opening at the base of the mesa's cliff face. It had been deliberately filled with rocks and soil. This wasn't a natural cave-in, but an intentional closure. Once the vegetation was cleared, stonework became visible. The stones had been placed with clear purpose, fitted together precisely. Brandon Fugel authorized careful excavation despite the warnings. Dr. Taylor insisted on strict safety protocols. Environmental monitoring equipment was staged around the site. Medical personnel were put on standby. Documentation cameras were positioned everywhere. The team was divided on whether they should proceed. Scientific curiosity battled against respect for ancient warnings, but the decision was made. They would open the sealed cave. The only question remaining was what they would find inside, and whether the Ute elders' warnings would prove true. Excavation began in June 2024, with a small team assembled for the initial work. Brandon Fugel and Dr. Travis Taylor were both present, along with security personnel stationed around the perimeter. Cameras recorded from multiple angles. Radiation detectors and air monitors were active. Atmospheric sensors measured everything. There was a palpable sense of unease among the crew from the moment work began. The stones were removed carefully, one by one, each catalogued and photographed. The stonework was remarkable. The stones fit together precisely with no mortar, expertly stacked by hands that knew exactly what they were doing. The age of the placement was impossible to determine, but the vegetation growth suggested the seal had been in place for centuries. The work proceeded slower than anticipated because of the care required. Strange occurrences began almost immediately. Equipment malfunctions increased dramatically. Batteries drained inexplicably fast, sometimes dying in minutes. Compass needles spun erratically. Team members reported severe headaches that wouldn't respond to medication. The feeling of being watched intensified. Animals on the property became extremely agitated. Ravens began gathering in unusual numbers near the excavation site, watching silently from the cliff edges. Late one afternoon, the final stones were removed. A dark opening was revealed, leading into the mesa. Cold air rushed out forcefully, carrying the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and wrong. The radiation detector spiked briefly, causing everyone to step back instinctively. They waited for the air to stabilize before attempting entry. Dr. Taylor volunteered to go first, with Brandon Fugel insisting on joining him. 2 security personnel followed. They donned full safety gear, oxygen monitors, communication headsets, and helmet-mounted cameras. The moment they crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped 15 degrees. The air quality readings were normal, but something felt fundamentally wrong about the atmosphere. Their flashlight beams revealed worked stone walls, not a natural cave, but a deliberately carved tunnel. The walls showed clear tool marks. The ceiling was carved in a dome shape. The floor was relatively level and clear of debris. The tunnel extended approximately 30 feet before opening into a larger chamber. Electromagnetic readings were fluctuating wildly, instruments registering impossible data. Near the entrance, strange symbols were carved into the stone, geometric patterns and curved lines that didn't match Ute script or any known native writing system. Some resembled petroglyphs found elsewhere on the ranch, but others were completely unfamiliar. Everything was photographed extensively. The team moved slowly deeper into the tunnel. Communication with the surface crew maintained. The sense of dread was increasing with every step. Then their lights hit the main chamber, and they saw what had been waiting in the darkness for centuries. The main chamber was roughly circular, approximately 40 feet in diameter with a domed ceiling reaching 12 feet at its highest point. This was not a natural cave. Every surface showed evidence of deliberate excavation. The walls had been carved with precision. The floor was covered in thick dust and sediment. Multiple alcoves had been cut into the walls at regular intervals, and scattered throughout the chamber were the skeletal remains of at least 15 human beings. The bodies were positioned in a disturbing arrangement. They formed a rough circle, all facing toward the center of the chamber. Some were in the wall alcoves. Others lay on the floor where they had fallen. The positions suggested these people had died here, not been buried after death. Several appeared to have their hands bound. Skulls showed signs of severe trauma. Some remains showed evidence of fire, with charring visible on bones and walls. The scene suggested ritual violence or mass execution. Dr. Travis Taylor's immediate assessment was chilling. "This is not a burial chamber," he said. "These people died violently. The age of the remains was uncertain without proper testing, but the preservation was unusual for the environment. Some skeletons were nearly complete while others were fragmented. Documentation began immediately. Every detail photographed and recorded. Objects were scattered among the remains. Stone tools and implements, carved bone fragments, metal objects corroded beyond recognition, pottery shards with disturbing designs, what appeared to be ceremonial items arranged deliberately around the bodies. Everything suggested a ritualistic purpose that no one could fully understand. The walls were completely covered in symbols. The ceiling, too, was heavily marked with carvings, geometric shapes intertwined with figures, humanoid forms with animal features, creatures that didn't match any known animal. The symbols repeated in complex patterns across every surface, as if the entire chamber was meant to convey a message or serve a specific purpose. In the exact center of the chamber stood a stone platform, circular and approximately 6 feet across. Its surface was worn smooth from extensive use. Dark staining covered the platform that could be ancient blood. Channels had been carved into the surface, all leading to a hole in the center. The hole was approximately 2 feet in diameter. When they shined flashlights into it, the beams disappeared into darkness. They dropped stones into the opening. No sound of impact ever returned. The air rising from the hole felt wrong. The temperature differential was extreme. Electromagnetic readings spiked dramatically near it. Team members reported feeling compelled to look into it, drawn by something they couldn't explain. Brandon Fugel ordered no one to approach the platform. Near the entrance, 2 sets of remains were positioned differently from the others. Their bones were reaching toward the sealed opening, hands extended as if they had tried desperately to escape. These bodies appeared newer than the others. They had died after the cave was sealed, trapped inside deliberately, left to die in complete darkness. The first night after the cave was opened, nearly every team member experienced vivid nightmares. What made it more disturbing was that multiple people reported the same images in their dreams. Visions of figures standing in the cave, shadows moving in the darkness. The sense of being watched became overwhelming. Security cameras positioned around the ranch captured unexplained movements near the mesa. Lights appeared that hadn't been seen before. The ranch experienced more anomalous activity in that single night than it had in the previous month combined. Physical effects on the team began immediately. Dr. Travis Taylor developed a severe headache that lasted 3 days despite medication. Other team members reported identical symptoms. Nausea and vertigo became common complaints. Unexplained skin rashes appeared on some personnel. Bruising manifested on arms and legs without any memory of injury. Medical examinations found nothing wrong, yet the symptoms persisted. Equipment failures escalated to unprecedented levels. Electronics near the cave entrance died constantly. Cameras failed within minutes of being positioned. Batteries that should have lasted hours drained in seconds. GPS systems showed impossible readings, placing the ranch in locations thousands of miles away. Communication equipment experienced constant interference. Even backup systems were affected. Some equipment was permanently damaged beyond repair. The phenomena across the entire ranch intensified dramatically. UFO sightings tripled in frequency. Events that previously occurred only at night now happened in broad daylight. Orbs appeared nightly over the mesa, captured on multiple camera systems. Electromagnetic anomalies were detected everywhere. Radiation spikes occurred in multiple locations simultaneously. The cattle became extremely agitated, refusing to graze near the mesa. Dogs wouldn't approach the area at all. Wildlife abandoned the entire section of the property. One senior researcher, an experienced investigator not easily frightened, demanded reassignment after just 2 trips into the cave. He claimed to hear voices in the chamber when no one else was speaking. He said something had followed him out of the cave and into his home. He reported seeing a shadow figure standing in his bedroom at night. Within a week, he left Skinwalker Ranch entirely and refused to discuss what he'd experienced. Brandon Fugel found himself torn between scientific curiosity and genuine concern for his team's safety. He consulted with experts nationwide, debating whether the cave should be resealed immediately. The documentary crew was capturing everything, and he was acutely aware of how the public might react to what they'd found. Dr. Travis Taylor maintained his scientific approach, insisting that the phenomena could be explained through rigorous study. He brought in additional monitoring equipment and increased sensor coverage across the property, but privately, even he admitted to feeling profound unease. "Something changed when we opened that cave," he told Brandon Fugel, "and whatever changed wasn't changing back." A forensic anthropologist was brought to the site to examine the skeletal remains. The bones were carefully removed for detailed analysis. Age estimation placed them between 150 and 300 years old. Though the range was unusually broad due to preservation anomalies, the remains represented a mix of male and female individuals, ranging from children to elderly adults. Trauma was evident on most of the skeletons, with causes of death varying across multiple factors. The injuries were deeply disturbing. Blunt force trauma had shattered skulls. Broken bones showed defensive wounds. Arms raised to ward off attacks. Some remains showed evidence of burning, charred in ways that suggested they were alive when the fire touched them. Cuts consistent with stone tools marked several bones. The pattern suggested ritual violence rather than warfare. Most horrifying was evidence of cannibalism on some of the bones, cut marks and breakage consistent with deliberate consumption of human flesh. DNA analysis was sent to multiple laboratories. The results came back incomplete and confusing. The DNA was degraded far beyond what the age of the remains should produce. Contamination from unknown sources appeared in every sample. Some samples showed genetic markers that the labs flagged as impossible, anomalies that shouldn't exist in human DNA. The laboratories requested resampling, certain there had been errors. The second round of tests produced the same inexplicable results. Linguists and anthropologists analyzed the symbols carved throughout the chamber. No match was found to any known writing system. Some similarities existed to ancient petroglyphs found worldwide, and the geometric patterns suggested possible astronomical alignments, but the meanings remained completely unknown. Several researchers who studied the symbols refused to continue their work. They claimed the carvings gave them nightmares and feelings of dread they couldn't shake. The central stone platform was tested for biological material. Results confirmed the presence of human blood from multiple individuals deposited over an extended period of time. Chemical analysis revealed other substances mixed with the blood, including possible hallucinogenic compounds. The platform had been used repeatedly for ritual purposes that remained unclear. The bottomless hole presented the most confounding mystery. Attempts to measure its depth all failed. A laser range finder returned no signal. A weighted line was lowered 200 feet without finding bottom. The geology of the area suggested such a deep shaft shouldn't exist. A camera was lowered into the darkness, but the video feed became increasingly distorted after 50 feet, showing static and impossible images before the camera was retrieved damaged and unusable. Radiation and electromagnetic readings in the chamber fluctuated dramatically, spiking without pattern or warning. Dr. Travis Taylor noted that the patterns seemed to pulse at regular intervals, as if the cave itself was breathing. Brandon Fugel requested a formal consultation with Ute tribal elders following the cave's opening. The elders agreed to visit the site but refused to enter the cave itself. They stood at the entrance, spoke prayers in their native language, and confirmed that this was indeed the sealed place their ancestors had warned about for generations. The stories passed down through oral tradition were true. The elders explained the Skinwalker legend, emphasizing it was not metaphor but literal belief. Skinwalkers were witches who gained dark powers through forbidden acts. They could shapeshift into animals and committed terrible crimes to acquire these abilities. They were outcasts who practiced rituals the tribe had banned. Eventually, the Skinwalkers were hunted by tribal warriors. This cave became their final refuge. According to the elders, the Skinwalkers had gathered in this place to conduct ceremonies involving human sacrifice. They were attempting to open a doorway, a portal to what the Ute called the Dark World. The tribal elders of that era decided the practices had to end permanently. Warriors surrounded the cave while medicine men performed protective rituals. Those trapped inside begged to be released. The tribe ignored their pleas and sealed the entrance with sacred stones, leaving them to die in complete darkness. The sealing was intentional entombment. The belief was that sealing the cave would trap the Skinwalkers' evil spirits inside, preventing them from ever influencing the world again. The warnings were passed down through every generation. The path of the Skinwalker must stay closed forever. The elders reacted with deep concern and visible anger when they learned the seal had been broken. They felt it showed profound disrespect for sacred boundaries that had been maintained for centuries. They predicted severe consequences. The strange phenomena would increase dramatically. The darkness would spread beyond the cave. The ranch would become far more dangerous than it had ever been. They offered to perform a new sealing ceremony using traditional methods. Brandon Fugel responded respectfully to their concerns but remained committed to the scientific investigation. He promised to proceed carefully and agreed to consult with the elders on all major decisions regarding the cave. The elders reluctantly accepted this compromise, but their final words were ominous. "You will see what we warned you about." They left sacred tobacco at the cave entrance as protection and refused to return to Skinwalker Ranch. Within days, their predictions began coming true in ways that terrified even the most skeptical members of the team. The phenomena on Skinwalker Ranch increased by over 300% following the cave's opening. Events that previously occurred only at night now happened during broad daylight. The intensity and frequency both escalated dramatically. The correlation between opening the cave and the surge in activity was undeniable, and the scientific team documented everything. Cattle were found dead with the same surgical precision that had plagued the ranch for decades. Internal organs were removed cleanly with no blood at the scene. No tracks or evidence of predators existed anywhere near the bodies. Security cameras positioned to watch the herds showed absolutely nothing during the times the deaths occurred. The mutilations happened within direct view of the mesa, following the same pattern that had terrorized the Sherman family 30 years earlier. Orbs began appearing nightly over the mesa, captured on multiple camera systems simultaneously. They performed maneuvers that violated known physics, accelerating instantly and changing direction without slowing. Larger craft were witnessed by the entire team on several occasions. Dr. Travis Taylor stated on camera, "We are observing technology that is beyond our current understanding." The government was contacted but provided no response. Team members reported disturbing experiences with time distortion. Hours would pass that felt like only minutes. People discovered memory gaps during investigations, unable to account for periods of missing time. Team members found themselves in locations they had no memory of walking to. Equipment registered impossible data that contradicted what observers remembered witnessing. Security footage showed events that nobody on the team could recall happening. Multiple team members reported encounters with the same entity, a tall humanoid figure with proportions that seemed fundamentally wrong. It was seen repeatedly near the cave entrance after dark. The figure would disappear instantly when approached. Infrared cameras occasionally captured it, but the heat signature was inconsistent with any living being. The descriptions matched exactly what previous ranch owners had reported over the decades. Brandon Fugel ensured everything was recorded and cataloged. Hundreds of hours of footage accumulated. Data from dozens of sensor arrays was analyzed by computer systems looking for patterns. Correlations emerged clearly linking the cave to surface events, but no satisfactory explanation existed for what was happening. Dr. Travis Taylor's perspective evolved dramatically. The scientist who had arrived as a skeptic now admitted publicly, "This challenges everything we understand about physics and reality. Conventional science cannot explain our observations." He began considering theories he would have dismissed before, including interdimensional hypotheses and possible connections between human consciousness and the phenomena. "We may have opened something we don't understand," he confessed to Brandon Fugel privately, "and I don't know if we can close it again." During a routine overnight experiment at Skinwalker Ranch, multiple cameras were rolling live. Not recreations, not reenactments, not dramatic television footage shot for entertainment purposes. Real-time surveillance capturing whatever moved through the monitored zone in complete darkness. This was not a planned test designed to provoke phenomena, not a scheduled experiment where researchers expected something to happen, and absolutely not something the team was prepared for or had protocols in place to handle. Something appeared inside the secure perimeter that night, something that triggered multiple sensors simultaneously, something that caused an immediate halt in all ongoing operations. The creature, entity, or unknown biological presence appeared for less than 30 seconds, long enough to be captured on camera from multiple angles, long enough to trigger alarm systems throughout the facility, long enough to make seasoned researchers, people who've spent years investigating unexplained phenomena, go completely silent. Skinwalker Ranch operates under constant surveillance that never stops, never sleeps, never takes a break. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, sophisticated monitoring systems track every single inch of the 512-acre property. Thermal imaging cameras detect heat signatures from anything warmer than the ambient environment. Motion sensors register movement down to the smallest animals, sensitive enough to detect rabbits and ground squirrels. Ground-penetrating radar maps subsurface activity looking for underground anomalies. Night vision towers provide overlapping coverage of the entire perimeter, eliminating blind spots. This isn't some weekend paranormal investigation team with handheld cameras and consumer equipment. This is a multi-million-dollar scientific operation funded by serious investors who demand results. Every system has redundancy. Every camera has backup power. Every sensor cross-references with other sensors to eliminate false positives and equipment errors. Unlike paranormal television shows that investigate locations for a few hours, then pack up their equipment and leave, Skinwalker Ranch experiments run continuously without interruption. Live camera feeds stream directly to a monitoring trailer where trained technicians watch screens in real time, day and night. Every alert gets logged with timestamps and sensor data. Every anomaly gets documented with multiple forms of evidence. Every sensor trigger gets cross-referenced with multiple independent systems to verify authenticity. The ranch operates on the fundamental principle that if something appears anywhere on the property, it will be recorded from more than one angle. Multiple cameras positioned at different elevations and distances. Multiple sensor types detecting different aspects of the same event. Multiple verification points ensuring that what's captured is real and measurable. Which means when something appears on these systems, when multiple sensors trigger simultaneously showing the same phenomenon, there's absolutely no room for equipment error, user mistake, or misidentification. It happened during late-night hours when minimal staff was present on the property. Just essential personnel monitoring standard surveillance systems from the command center. Nothing unusual had been scheduled for that evening. No experiments were actively running that would explain strange readings. No deliberate provocation of phenomena. Just routine observation of a property that's proven time and time again to be anything but routine. Then, the alerts started coming in. Motion sensors detecting movement in a specific sector, but thermal cameras showing no corresponding heat signature in that location. Then, thermal imaging picking up heat where nothing visible appeared on standard cameras. Audio sensors spiking with frequencies that had no identifiable source in the known animal database. The technicians monitoring the feeds initially assumed wildlife. A deer wandering near the perimeter fence looking for water. Maybe a coyote hunting for rabbits in the brush. Equipment errors happen even with the best technology. Environmental interference from weather patterns or unusual atmospheric conditions can trigger false readings on sensitive instruments. Standard operating procedure is to review the footage systematically, identify the source of the anomaly, log it in the database with explanatory notes, and continue monitoring for additional activity. But this time was fundamentally different from routine false alarms. One of the fixed position cameras positioned near the tree line captured movement that didn't match any known animal native to the Utah region. The shape moved wrong, biomechanics that didn't fit any cataloged species. The behavior patterns were wrong, actions that violated known wildlife psychology. Everything about what appeared on that screen violated the technicians' expectations of normal wildlife activity. And when they replayed the footage, when they watched it again in slow motion, analyzing every frame, the realization hit them like physical impact. That wasn't a coyote. That wasn't a deer or elk. That wasn't anything they could easily identify or explain away. The footage shows a silhouette near the tree line at the property's eastern perimeter. Dark form against darker background of night vegetation. Movement that appears upright initially, human-like in posture and stance, suggesting bipedal locomotion. Then suddenly, without transition or awkward adjustment, it drops low to the ground, moving on all fours with fluid coordination that suggests this is natural for it. The head movement is what captures immediate attention and creates unease. Deliberate scanning motion, purposeful examination of the area, looking in specific directions as if searching for something particular or assessing its environment with intelligence. The timestamp is clearly visible in the corner of the frame. No jump cuts or editing transitions. No manipulation of the footage. Just continuous recording from a fixed position camera that had been running for hours before this moment and continued running for hours afterward. The tracking data shows the camera never moved, never panned, never zoomed, This is exactly what the lens captured. For approximately 23 seconds, the figure remains partially visible on camera, moving between areas of cover, using vegetation and terrain features strategically, pausing to look in specific directions with what appears to be deliberate observation. And then, according to the technicians who watched this event happen live in real time, the creature turns its head directly toward the camera position, as if it knows exactly where the surveillance equipment is located, as if it's aware of being observed and has identified the source of observation. It holds that position for 3 full seconds, long enough for the operators to realize they're not just watching something, they're being watched back by something that understands it's under surveillance. Then it moves behind brush in one fluid motion and disappears from view. No sound captured on the directional microphones. No breaking branches or rustling leaves. No footsteps registering on the ground-level audio sensors. Just there one moment, visible and present, then gone the next. The monitoring room reportedly went completely silent as the technicians processed what they just witnessed. One of the senior technicians, according to multiple sources who were present in the monitoring room that night, broke the heavy silence with a statement that would be repeated in every subsequent briefing and analysis session. "That's not a coyote." 3 simple words that summarized what everyone in that room understood instinctively and immediately. Whatever they just witnessed on their screens didn't match known wildlife patterns or behavior, didn't move like any animal species native to the Utah desert environment, and most disturbing, didn't behave in any way that fit conventional scientific understanding of how animals interact with human surveillance equipment and technology. The immediate protocol was activated without discussion. Secure all footage from every camera angle, log the precise timestamps down to the second, document every single sensor reading from every monitoring system, cross-reference all data points to build a complete picture, and notify the senior science team immediately regardless of the late hour. This wasn't something that could wait until morning. This required immediate expert analysis. The complete footage from all camera angles has never been publicly released in its entirety. Fragments have appeared in episodes of the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch television series. Still frames have been shown during scientific presentations and conferences. Short clips have been included in documentaries, but the full 23 seconds of continuous footage captured from multiple camera positions with all accompanying sensor data, environmental readings, and audio recordings remains restricted from public viewing. The official explanations for withholding this evidence vary depending on who's asked and when. Ongoing investigations that could be compromised by premature public disclosure, risk of misinterpretation by viewers without scientific training that could fuel unfounded conspiracy theories, concern about potential public panic if the footage was presented without proper scientific context and expert analysis, and perhaps most significantly, complete inability to definitively classify or explain what the cameras actually captured that night. This pattern of selective disclosure and information control isn't unique to this particular incident. Past events at Skinwalker Ranch have followed remarkably similar trajectories over the years. Footage shown only in carefully edited fragments, with the most compelling or potentially disturbing portions removed. Sections deliberately blurred or obscured to prevent viewers from seeing specific details. Still frames presented instead of full video sequences to prevent frame-by-frame analysis by curious viewers and independent researchers. The question becomes unavoidable and increasingly difficult to dismiss. Was this footage withheld because researchers genuinely couldn't explain what it showed using conventional scientific frameworks? Or was it withheld because it showed too much? Because the implications of releasing clear, unambiguous footage of an unidentified creature moving through the property with apparent intelligence and awareness would create questions and controversies that nobody in positions of authority or responsibility wanted to manage or address publicly. Dr. Travis Taylor is not someone prone to exaggeration, sensationalism, or making claims beyond what evidence supports. As an aerospace engineer and optical scientist with decades of experience working on highly classified government programs requiring security clearances and rigorous scientific methodology, he approaches every single anomaly with deep skepticism and systematic analysis. His professional reputation, built over years of serious work, depends entirely on measured, careful, evidence-based conclusions, which makes his specific language choices about this incident particularly noteworthy and revealing. He never called it a creature in any public statement or interview, never used emotionally loaded terms like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or Skinwalker Skinwalker in his analysis. Instead, he referred to it consistently and deliberately as an unknown biological anomaly. Technical terminology, clinical description, deliberately neutral phrasing that avoids speculation. He emphasized repeatedly in every discussion that conclusions should be data-driven, not belief-driven, or influenced by preconceptions. But here's what matters most, and what reveals the significance of this event. In all his careful, meticulously measured statements about the incident, Dr. Taylor never once said it wasn't alive, never suggested it was simply misidentified wildlife that could be easily explained, never proposed a conventional explanation that would close the case and allow everyone to move on. His focus remained laser-focused on the empirical evidence. Multiple independent sensors confirming the same event from different positions. Pattern behavior that strongly suggested environmental awareness and possibly intelligence. Movement characteristics that appeared purposeful and deliberate rather than instinctive or reactive. In one particularly revealing interview, he made a statement that revealed more than any dramatic claim possibly could. When something reacts to being observed, when it demonstrates clear awareness of surveillance equipment and human presence, when it modifies its behavior based on that awareness, that's precisely when we pay very, very close attention to what we're dealing with. What happened in the minutes following the visual sighting is every bit as disturbing as the sighting itself, perhaps even more so. Approximately 7 minutes after the creature disappeared from all camera views, radiation detectors positioned around the property perimeter registered a measurable spike above baseline levels. Nothing immediately dangerous to human health, but definitely and undeniably elevated above normal background radiation. Temperature sensors strategically placed throughout the monitoring zone recorded a sudden, sharp fluctuation, dropping several degrees Fahrenheit in a highly localized area precisely where the figure had been visible moments before. Multiple pieces of sophisticated monitoring equipment experienced simultaneous interference that affected data collection across different types of systems. Not complete failures or total shutdowns that would suggest power problems, but subtle disruptions in normal functioning that degraded measurement accuracy. The troubling pattern that emerged. All these measurable effects occurred after the visual sighting, not before it, as would be expected. Normal wildlife encounters at monitoring stations follow an absolutely predictable sequence that's been documented thousands of times. Animals approach an area searching for food, water, or shelter. Their physical movement triggers motion sensors first. Their body heat registers clearly on thermal imaging cameras. Audio sensors pick up sounds of movement through vegetation, breathing, vocalizations. Visual cameras then confirm species identity through physical characteristics. Sensors always trigger first, providing advance warning before visual confirmation occurs. This incident at Skinwalker Ranch completely reversed that established sequence. Visual confirmation came first, with cameras capturing the creature before any other detection systems registered anything unusual. The figure appeared on screen moving through the monitored zone. Then, only after it had disappeared from view entirely, the sophisticated equipment began showing unusual and unexplained readings. That fundamental reversal troubled experienced researchers significantly. It suggested strongly that whatever they'd captured on camera didn't behave according to known physical and biological patterns, didn't interact with the environment the way flesh and blood animals predictably do. The folklore surrounding skinwalkers is ancient, specific, and genuinely disturbing when examined in detail. According to traditional Navajo beliefs that have been passed down through generations, skinwalkers are malevolent witches who possess the supernatural ability to transform into animals or take on animal characteristics while somehow maintaining complete human-level intelligence and awareness. They're said to mimic the appearance and behavior of animals and humans with unsettling accuracy, to appear near places where they're actively being observed, discussed, or investigated, to move fluidly between different physical forms with practiced ease. The reported characteristics of skinwalkers match disturbingly well with certain specific aspects of what the surveillance footage actually showed. Upright bipedal posture that transitions smoothly and naturally to quadrupedal movement without awkward adjustment. Sudden appearance and equally sudden disappearance without any detectable sound. Behavior strongly suggesting active awareness of being watched and recorded, as if the entity was consciously choosing to show itself, to be absolutely clear and avoid misrepresentation, the Skinwalker Ranch research team never officially labeled or classified what appeared on their surveillance cameras as a skinwalker according to traditional definition. They avoided that specific terminology very deliberately and consistently. Science demands empirical evidence and testable hypotheses, not reliance on cultural mythology or folklore, regardless of how compelling the parallels might appear. But viewers of the footage, particularly those already familiar with the detailed Navajo legends and traditional stories, immediately made the obvious connection. The behavioral similarities were simply too striking, too specific, too numerous to casually ignore or dismiss. And the property itself, of course, bears the name Skinwalker Ranch specifically because of its extraordinarily long documented history of phenomena that closely matches indigenous descriptions of these entities going back many generations. Whether the creature captured on multiple cameras was actually a skinwalker, according to the precise traditional definition, remains fundamentally unknowable, but the undeniable fact that trained scientists with sophisticated equipment couldn't provide any conventional scientific explanation, that speaks volumes. The questions this incident raises are significantly more disturbing than any definitive answers could possibly be. Why did this particular creature or entity appear only once during continuous monitoring? In literally years of non-stop surveillance, capturing thousands upon thousands of hours of footage showing normal wildlife activity. Why does this specific unknown entity show up for exactly 23 seconds, then never appear again despite constant monitoring? Why specifically during active surveillance with multiple operators watching screens in real time? Was the timing purely coincidental chance, or did it appear specifically and deliberately because sophisticated surveillance systems were actively operating and recording? Why did multiple sensors react measurably after the visual sighting rather than before, as would be expected with normal wildlife? What does that fundamental reversal of detection patterns suggest about its actual physical nature? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, did it know precisely where the cameras were strategically positioned throughout the property? Did it deliberately position itself to be captured on specific camera angles? Past detailed reports from Skinwalker Ranch, documented over decades by multiple independent research teams, describe entities and phenomena that consistently appear to avoid direct illumination from artificial light sources, that demonstrably react to being actively observed by withdrawing from view or significantly altering their behavior patterns, that manifest with notably increased frequency during active scientific experiments, as if somehow drawn by or responding to the investigation itself. This particular creature fits that well-established historical pattern almost perfectly, appearing specifically at night when natural visibility is severely limited and shadows provide concealment, staying deliberately at the extreme edge of camera range rather than moving confidently into well-lit, openly monitored areas, disappearing immediately the precise moment it seemed to recognize it was being recorded by multiple surveillance systems. The behavior strongly suggests intelligence and environmental awareness, suggests consciousness not just of its immediate surroundings, but specifically of human monitoring capabilities and surveillance technology, suggests clear intention behind its brief, calculated appearance, rather than random chance. This absolutely wasn't just a random animal wandering accidentally through the property. This surveillance footage doesn't constitute absolute proof of anything supernatural or paranormal in nature. It's definitely not a deliberate hoax, verified independently by multiple sophisticated systems and witnessed directly by credible professionals with scientific training and no motivation to fabricate evidence. But it's also not definitive, irrefutable proof of Bigfoot, skinwalkers, or any other specific cryptid from folklore or legend. What it genuinely represents is an unresolved moment captured in time, documented physical evidence of something unknown appearing at one of America's most intensively studied paranormal locations, something that multiple independent cameras captured from different angles simultaneously, something that triggered sophisticated sensors and monitoring equipment in measurable ways, something that trained scientists and experienced researchers couldn't conventionally explain using established scientific frameworks, and something that's never been seen again anywhere on the property despite years of continuous, comprehensive monitoring following the incident. No official explanation has ever been publicly released or made available. The footage exists in archives, but answers remain elusive. For years, Dr. Travis Taylor was the steady voice of reason at Skinwalker Ranch, While others reacted to strange lights, impossible readings, and moments that defied explanation, he stayed calm, analytical, and grounded. He was brought in to make sense of the chaos. The scientist audiences trusted to translate fear into data. But now, things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor, at least according to growing rumors that refuse to fade. Quietly, without explanation, he appeared to step back. No clear goodbye, no firm denial, just distance. Whispers began circulating that what happened at the ranch didn't stay at the ranch, that the phenomena followed him home, disrupted his sleep, weighed on his mind. Some even claim he needed time away because something attached itself to him, not physically, but psychologically. Whether these claims are true or not, one thing is undeniable. The confident man viewers once knew seemed changed. Tonight, we're breaking down why people believe things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor now, and what Skinwalker Ranch may have taken from him long after the cameras stopped rolling. Subscribe because this story isn't about what he studied, it's about what may have started studying him back. Long before rumors of anything tragic began circulating, Dr. Travis Taylor was seen as the most stable presence at Skinwalker Ranch. He wasn't brought in to chase stories or react emotionally to strange events. He was brought in because he was trained to handle complexity, uncertainty, and pressure without losing objectivity. His background in aerospace engineering and physics meant he was used to working on problems where mistakes weren't dramatic, they were catastrophic. That mindset shaped how he approached the ranch from the very beginning. Early on, Travis treated Skinwalker Ranch like a system that could be understood, not controlled, but understood. He believed that with enough sensors, repeatable testing, and careful observation, patterns would emerge. Even when things didn't make sense, he didn't panic. He documented, he recalibrated, he tried again. That calm confidence became central to the show's credibility. When something strange happened, viewers didn't wait for reactions. They waited for Travis to explain what it might mean. And for a while, he did. But what made him effective also placed a unique burden on him. When experiments failed, it wasn't just a mystery. It was his responsibility. Skinwalker Ranch isn't a controlled environment. Variables shift without warning. Phenomena don't repeat cleanly. Data appears, disappears, then returns altered. Over time, Travis moved from observing anomalies to actively interacting with them. Rockets were launched. Signals were sent. Energy was introduced into a space no one fully understood. At first, this looked like progress, but slowly, something changed. Not fear, not panic. Weight. The weight of being the one expected to have answers in a place that didn't behave like anything he had studied before. He didn't enter Skinwalker Ranch naive, which makes the question harder to ignore. What does it take to push someone like him to step back at all? The moment things began to change for Dr. Travis Taylor wasn't marked by a single incident. It was marked by restraint. Viewers didn't see panic or fear. They saw something far more unsettling. Hesitation from a man who rarely hesitated. Early in the investigation, Travis leaned into anomalies. Strange readings were invitations to test further. Equipment failures were problems to solve. But as the seasons progressed, his approach shifted. He started slowing things down, repeating warnings about unknown consequences, emphasizing observation over interaction. These weren't creative decisions. They were behavioral ones. Fans picked up on it long before rumors existed. Comment sections filled with questions about why Travis seemed more serious, more guarded, why he often stopped experiments earlier than expected, why he repeatedly advised against pushing certain tests further. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't loss of interest. It was a change in how he perceived risk. His language changed too. Early explanations were confident and forward-looking. Later ones were cautious, filled with phrases like, "We don't fully understand," and "We need to be careful here." He began framing the ranch less like a mystery to solve, and more like a system that reacted unpredictably to interference. Body language reinforced it. He no longer rushed toward the data. He stood back, watching the environment itself. When readings spiked, his eyes went to the sky before the screens. When equipment failed, he didn't look surprised. He looked concerned. According to people familiar with the production, Travis began privately questioning whether repeated experimentation was escalating responses, not in a supernatural sense, but in a systemic one, like pushing on a structure that pushes back harder each time. That realization doesn't come lightly to a scientist trained to test limits. This is where people now say things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor, because curiosity didn't disappear. It transformed into responsibility, and responsibility carries weight that excitement never does. When a scientist begins treating an experiment like something that might be watching back, the work changes, and so does the person doing it. That shift didn't make headlines, but it set the stage for everything that followed. One of the most disturbing rumors surrounding Dr. Travis Taylor isn't about what happened at Skinwalker Ranch. It's about what allegedly happened after he went home. According to people close to the situation, the phenomena didn't respect filming schedules or property lines. And that idea alone is what changed everything. Travis had always drawn a firm line between work and personal life. The ranch was the ranch. Home was home. But whispers began circulating that the separation stopped holding. Not dramatic hauntings or Hollywood horror. Something quieter and more unsettling. Sleep disruption. Sudden waking at the same hours night after night. Persistent feelings of being watched, even in familiar spaces. What troubled those around him wasn't fear, but consistency. The patterns mirrored things he had documented at the ranch. Repeated disturbances without clear triggers. Moments of heightened alert with no visible cause. The kind of experiences scientists hate because they resist measurement, yet refuse to go away. On camera, Travis remained professional, but off camera, according to insiders, he started limiting discussions about certain events. He avoided speculating. He deflected questions that pushed beyond data. This wasn't dismissal, it was containment. Friends noticed changes too. He became more guarded about his routines, more deliberate about where he spent time. Conversations drifted away from the ranch entirely, as if saying too much invited something unwanted back into focus. For a man who once openly analyzed every anomaly, silence became the new boundary. This is where the rumors took a darker turn. Some claim Travis believed that attention itself played a role, that observation, discussion, and experimentation might amplify effects rather than clarify them. Whether psychological or environmental, the conclusion was the same. Distance mattered, and that's why stepping back became necessary. Not because he had no answers, but because continuing to push may have carried consequences no data set could justify. To scientists, the most terrifying variable is one you can't isolate. If even part of this is true, then things truly are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor now, because the cost of understanding may have followed him long after he tried to walk away. And once an experience reshapes how you sleep, think, and feel safe, there is no simple reset. By the time rumors of Travis Taylor stepping back began circulating publicly, the decision had likely already been made in private, and according to those familiar with the situation, it wasn't sudden, it was inevitable. Skinwalker Ranch had stopped being a controlled research environment, not because of any single event, but because of accumulation, repeated anomalies, escalating responses, patterns that didn't repeat cleanly but adapted. For a scientist, that's the point where caution outweighs curiosity. Travis had spent years explaining that the ranch behaved like a feedback system. The more it was probed, the more it reacted. Early on, that idea was theoretical. Later, it became practical. Experiments that once produced mild data spikes began triggering broader effects. Equipment failures weren't isolated anymore. They rippled. Communication dropped. Instruments malfunctioned simultaneously. Timing became unpredictable. Privately, Travis reportedly began asking a dangerous question. Not what the phenomenon was, but whether it should be provoked at all. That question doesn't fit well in a televised investigation. Viewers want progress. Networks want escalation. Science, however, demands restraint when risk crosses an unknown threshold. The rumored turning point wasn't fear, it was responsibility. Travis wasn't just accountable to data anymore. He was accountable to people, crew members, colleagues, families. When uncertainty includes potential harm, the ethical choice shifts. Those close to him say he began advocating for longer pauses between experiments, less invasive testing, more observation. But the ranch doesn't wait, and television doesn't slow down easily. At some point, the pace of investigation and the pace of caution stopped aligning. Stepping away wasn't an admission of defeat. It was an acknowledgement that some environments extract a price for prolonged exposure. Whether psychological, physiological, or something still undefined, the toll was becoming impossible to ignore. This is why many now say things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor. Not because he failed, but because he may have succeeded enough to realize when walking away was the only responsible move. And walking away from unanswered questions is often harder than facing them. One of the least discussed aspects of Skinwalker Ranch isn't the lights, the signals, or the unexplained readings. It's the psychological cost of prolonged uncertainty, and this is where many believe things became truly tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor. Scientists are trained to operate within frameworks. Hypotheses hypotheses are tested, variables isolated, conclusions refined. Skinwalker Ranch refused to stay inside those boundaries. For Travis, that meant living in a constant state of unresolved tension. Not fear, but cognitive dissonance. Data that suggested intelligence without communication, patterns without predictability, reactions without cause. Over time, that kind of environment wears down even the most disciplined mind. According to people close to him, Travis began expressing frustration not at the unknown itself, but at the inability to close loops. Every answer created two new questions. Every explanation collapsed under the next anomaly. The work never resolved. It lingered. What makes this especially heavy is that Travis understood the implications better than most. He knew how dangerous it is for the human mind to constantly search for meaning where none can be confirmed. That state leads to hypervigilance, overanalysis, difficulty disengaging. Insiders say he became more introspective, less reactive, not detached, cautious. He began limiting exposure to the ranch even mentally, avoiding rewatching footage, redirecting conversations away from speculation. These weren't avoidance behaviors, they were protective ones. The tragedy here isn't terror. It's responsibility colliding with uncertainty. Travis wasn't overwhelmed by fear. He was burdened by awareness. Awareness that some environments may never provide closure, yet still demand attention. When a scientist realizes that continuous exposure may erode objectivity itself, stepping back becomes an act of preservation. But that doesn't erase the imprint. The questions don't stop forming just because you stop asking them out loud. This is why the idea that things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor now resonates with so many, not because he lost control, but because he gained a kind of understanding that makes peace harder to find. And some truths don't haunt you because they're frightening. They haunt you because they never let you finish the thought. By this point in the story, many viewers noticed a shift, not just in Dr. Travis Taylor's presence, but in how he carried himself. He was still articulate, still analytical, but there was a growing sense that he was conserving energy, choosing words carefully, choosing moments carefully. This is where rumors of him needing time away began to take shape. People close to the production have suggested that Travis didn't quit in a dramatic sense. Instead, he began creating distance in quiet, deliberate ways. Fewer late-night reviews of footage, less immersion in speculative discussion, more emphasis on boundaries, personal and professional. To outsiders, it looked like withdrawal. To those who understand high-pressure research environments, it looked like self-preservation. The idea that something followed him home is often repeated online. But what's more plausible and more tragic is that the effects of the work lingered. Not a creature, not an entity, but the mental residue of prolonged exposure to unresolved anomalies. Sleep disruption, heightened alertness, the feeling that your environment is no longer entirely predictable. Several fans have pointed out moments where Travis openly emphasized stepping away from speculation, grounding himself in routine, and focusing on family and normalcy. Those statements matter. They suggest someone actively re-anchoring themselves after spending years in a place where cause and effect often broke down. This is the part of the story that doesn't make headlines. No monster, no confrontation, just a man recognizing that continued exposure might cost more than it gives. For someone whose identity is built around curiosity and discovery, that realization cuts deep. If the ranch teaches anything, it's that not all dangers are external. Some are cumulative, invisible, slow, and when a scientist chooses distance over dominance, it isn't weakness, it's discipline. That's why many believe things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor now. Not because he was defeated, but because he had the clarity to walk away from something that refused to let go. And sometimes, leaving is the only way to keep yourself intact. What truly fueled the belief that things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor wasn't an announcement, it was the silence. In the world of television and public-facing science, silence is rarely accidental. When someone leaves on good terms, explanations usually follow. When rumors are false, they're often shut down quickly. In Travis's case, neither happened. Speculation spread fast. Claims that he had been haunted, that something at Skinwalker Ranch attached itself to him, that the phenomena followed him beyond the gates. While these ideas leaned toward the sensational, what made them linger was that they were never directly denied. Not confirmed, but not dismissed either. Those close to Travis describe him as deeply careful with language. He doesn't amplify rumors, but he also doesn't mock them. That restraint has only intensified public curiosity. When asked about lingering effects of the ranch, his responses tend to shift towards stress, responsibility, and the importance of knowing when to step back. He speaks about limits, not fear. That distinction matters. If nothing had changed, there would be no reason to avoid the topic. But avoidance suggests weight, and weight suggests consequence. Fans began revisiting old episodes, noticing moments where Travis looked genuinely unsettled, not theatrically but quietly. Long pauses, staring at data longer than necessary, choosing not to speculate on camera when others did. In hindsight, these moments feel less like confidence and more like restraint. The tragedy here isn't the rumors themselves, it's what they're built on. A visible shift in a man who once seemed untouched by the chaos around him. Silence became his boundary, distance became his defense. And when someone as analytical as Travis chooses silence, it's rarely because there's nothing to say. It's because saying it might cost too much, professionally, personally, or psychologically. Whether the rumors are exaggerated or not almost becomes secondary. What matters is that something at Skinwalker Ranch changed how he engages with the unknown, and that change was never reversed. Sometimes the most unsettling confirmation isn't a statement, it's what someone chooses not to explain. As Skinwalker Ranch continued without him, another layer of the tragedy began to take shape. New experiments, new reactions, new theories. Yet for many longtime viewers, something felt missing. The calm filter Travis once provided, the ability to absorb chaos without feeding it, was gone. And that absence made his departure feel heavier over time. For Dr. Travis Taylor, stepping away didn't mean the work ended. It meant he carried the understanding with him while others continued digging. That creates a unique burden. When you know enough to question the value of continued exposure, watching others press forward can feel isolating. You're no longer part of the search, but you're also not free from its implications. People close to him have hinted that this was the hardest part. Not fear, not regret, but separation. Separation from colleagues, from unfinished questions, and from a place that had reshaped how he understood reality itself. Skinwalker Ranch wasn't just a location. It was a prolonged confrontation with uncertainty. Walking away meant accepting that some answers may never come, and that seeking them might do more harm than good. That acceptance isn't easy for a scientist. Curiosity is instinctive. Stepping back feels like betrayal of the work, of the audience, of your own nature. Yet Travis chose restraint over obsession. That decision alone speaks volumes. The tragedy deepens when you realize that restraint often goes unseen. Viewers celebrate discovery, not withdrawal. They applaud breakthroughs, not boundaries. But sometimes the most responsible act is knowing when continuing the experiment risks contaminating the experimenter. Travis didn't leave loudly. He didn't dramatize his distance. He let the work continue without him. And in doing so, he accepted a quieter role, one where understanding comes at the cost of participation. That's the kind of loss that doesn't trend, but it's the kind that stays with you long after the noise fades. When people say things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor now, they often imagine a dramatic ending, a final encounter, a terrifying moment, or a clear-cut explanation. But the real tragedy is quieter and far more human. Dr. Travis Taylor didn't lose his credibility. He didn't lose his career. He didn't vanish or spiral. What he appears to have lost is something harder to measure: the ability to engage with the unknown without cost. Skinwalker Ranch didn't defeat him. It changed him. And change, especially irreversible change, is often where tragedy truly lives. He entered the ranch as a scientist tasked with bringing order to chaos. He left as someone who understood that some environments resist closure, and that constant exposure to unresolved anomalies can erode clarity itself. That realization doesn't come without consequence. Once you see where curiosity can lead, you can't unknow it. The rumors about him being haunted persist because they symbolize something real, even if exaggerated. Not a creature following him, but the lingering questions, the patterns that never resolved. The sense that certain doors, once opened, don't close neatly behind you. What makes this tragic is that Travis did exactly what a responsible mind should do. He stepped back. He chose boundaries. He protected his objectivity, his family, and his mental well-being. But in doing so, he had to leave behind a role that defined him in the public eye. The man who could stand calmly in the middle of the impossible. And that's the cost few talk about. Walking away doesn't mean you escape the experience. It means you carry it quietly, without the outlet of exploration or explanation. So when people say things are tragic for Dr. Travis Taylor now, it isn't because he failed. It's because he learned enough to know when continuing would cost him something he couldn't afford to lose. And sometimes the heaviest consequences of the unknown aren't what you encounter. They're what you're forced to leave behind. New details have surfaced about what Bryant "Dragon" Arnold's life has become since his sudden disappearance from the secret of Skinwalker Ranch, and what insiders are now revealing is far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. For 3 seasons, Dragon stood as the ranch's protector, its enforcer, the man who guarded the boundary between our world and whatever waited beyond it. But something happened to him out there, something that didn't just push him away from the cameras, something that followed him home. Tonight, we uncover the tragic reality of Dragon's life after Skinwalker Ranch, and why those who knew him say he's never been the same. The ranch didn't just change Dragon, it marked him, and according to people close to the situation, that mark has become a curse he can't escape. What you're about to hear goes beyond anything shown on television. This is the story of a man who dedicated everything to protecting others from the unknown, only to become its primary target. From unexplained encounters that were never filmed, to the psychological breakdown that forced him to walk away, to the haunting reality of his life today. Dragon's story is a warning about what happens when you stare too long into the abyss, and the abyss decides to stare back. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. Bryant Arnold wasn't supposed to disappear. He was the kind of man who seemed permanent, rooted to the land like the mesa itself. For years, he was more than just security. He was the last line of defense, the one person Brandon Fugal trusted above all others to keep the ranch secure. Dragon didn't just protect the property from trespassers or curious tourists. He protected the world from what lived beneath that cursed ground. His presence alone was a deterrent, not just to people, but to whatever forces seemed to pulse through that valley. But in the spring of his final season, something fundamental changed. The crew noticed it first. Dragon stopped engaging in casual conversation. He avoided the command center unless absolutely necessary. He triple-checked locks on doors that had never needed checking before. His patrols became longer, more erratic, as if he was searching for something or running from something he couldn't name. And then one morning, without any warning or explanation, he drove off the property and never came back. No press release, no farewell episode, no official statement, just gone. What most people don't know is that Dragon didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because staying meant losing himself completely, surrendering to something that had been circling him for years. And according to those close to him, that surrender is exactly what's happening now. The man who once seemed unshakable has become a shadow of his former self, haunted by experiences that refuse to stay buried. Dragon's disappearance wasn't an ending. It was an escape attempt, and tragically, it didn't work. Dragon's unraveling didn't start when the cameras were rolling. It started years before, during his earliest patrols on the ranch, long before the show ever aired. Back then, he reported strange disturbances to Brandon Fugal, things he couldn't easily explain or rationalize, lights that moved against the wind direction, shadows that stretched impossibly long across the ground at noon, cold spots that appeared without warning in the middle of summer heat. And one night, alone on the West Ridge during a routine patrol, he saw it for the first time, a shimmering distortion hovering several feet above the ground, twisting the air around it like heat rising from asphalt on a scorching day. But the temperature wasn't hot, it was freezing cold. Dragon froze in place. He didn't draw his weapon. He didn't radio for help. He didn't move at all. He just stood there in the darkness, watching as the thing watched him back. There was an intelligence to it, a presence that felt aware and calculating. Then, without warning, it vanished. Not faded gradually, not drifted away. It simply ceased to exist, like someone had flipped a switch and removed it from reality. Dragon never filed an official report about the incident, never told the scientists what he'd witnessed, never mentioned it on camera or in any interview. But from that night forward, he carried himself differently, like a man who knew he'd been marked, tagged, chosen for something he couldn't yet understand. And as the years passed and the show began filming, Dragon realized with growing dread that he was right. Whatever had watched him that night on the West Ridge hadn't forgotten him. It was waiting, observing, planning its next move. The moment that truly began pulling Dragon away from the show happened late one night near the south fence line. During what should have been a routine perimeter check, Dragon was walking the property with 2 crew members after strange radio interference spiked across every channel simultaneously. They expected to find trespassers, maybe teenagers trying to sneak onto the property, or perhaps just an equipment malfunction. Instead, the temperature dropped so hard and so fast that all 3 men's breath hung thick in the air like dense fog. Even the insects stopped making sound. The silence was oppressive, unnatural, wrong. That's when Dragon noticed it. A tall figure standing motionless on the ridge, silhouetted against the night sky, backlit by nothing but pale moonlight. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, a trick of the light, his mind filling in patterns where none existed. Then it moved, not like a human being, not like any animal he'd ever tracked. It shifted sideways across the ground without taking a single step, gliding as if the laws of physics didn't apply to it. One of the camera operators whispered urgently, "What the hell is that?" But Dragon didn't answer. His hand hovered over his sidearm, not drawing the weapon, just bracing himself for whatever might come next. The figure paused at the base of the mesa slope, seeming to regard them with invisible eyes. Then it vanished, not walked away into the darkness, not ran. It simply blinked out of existence like a light being switched off. Dragon stepped forward slowly, almost against his will, as if pulled by a force he couldn't explain or resist. He scanned the ridge methodically, ordered the others to fall back to a safe distance, and attempted to radio base. But the radio shrieked with a metallic warping noise that made both men cover their ears in pain. After the interference finally cleared, Dragon spoke only 2 words into the radio. "Shut it down!" The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, but everyone on the crew noticed the fundamental change in him. He stared at the mesa longer during his patrol. He stopped joking with the camera crew, and something deep inside him had shifted permanently. Several weeks after the ridge encounter, Dragon was working late, reviewing drone footage alone in the command trailer, what he used to call his safe place. Nothing strange ever happened in that trailer. No cold spots, no equipment failures, no unexplained shadows. It was the one building on the entire property that everyone trusted implicitly. But one night, shortly after midnight, as Dragon sat reviewing surveillance footage in complete solitude, every monitor in front of him froze simultaneously on the exact same frame, a frame that by all logic shouldn't have existed. On every screen, from every camera angle throughout the property, the footage showed the exact same impossible image, a silhouette standing directly behind Dragon inside the trailer, only a few feet from where he currently sat. It wasn't tall or monstrous in the traditional sense, but the proportions were fundamentally wrong, too long, too narrow. The angles bent unnaturally, like something was wearing the shape of a human being, didn't understand how to properly fit inside it. Dragon spun around instantly, hand reaching for his weapon, every muscle tensed for confrontation, but nothing was there. The space behind him was completely empty, yet the air in that spot was ice cold, almost wet, like he'd suddenly opened a freezer door in a humid room. The monitors flickered erratically. The silhouette disappeared from the screen. Then, one by one in sequence, each screen began replaying the last 2 seconds of footage backward without any input from Dragon whatsoever. He hit keys frantically, slammed the power button repeatedly, physically yanked cables from their connection, but it didn't matter. Nothing he did made any difference. The screen stayed on, continuing to play impossibly reversed footage of something standing in the exact spot where he had been sitting moments before. The distortion formed a kind of outline around the figure, like static electricity was tracing its edges. But the face was the absolute worst part, blurred and smeared like wet paint dragged across canvas, except 2 dark hollows stared out from the center of it, watching him with terrible focus, evaluating him like a specimen. By the time the system finally powered down completely, Dragon was shaken in a way no one on the crew had ever witnessed before. When the tech team checked all the equipment the next morning, they found absolutely nothing. No corrupted files, no glitch logs, no abnormal activity recorded anywhere in the system. There was no trace of the silhouette, no evidence the monitors had ever malfunctioned, no proof that anything unusual had happened at all. But Dragon knew exactly what he had seen, and from that night forward, he absolutely refused to stay in the command trailer alone under any circumstances. The breaking point came during what should have been just another routine nighttime perimeter sweep. Dragon had completed hundreds of these walks over the years, checking fence lines, monitoring sensors, logging wildlife activity. It was muscle memory by that point. But this particular night, the air felt fundamentally wrong from the moment he stepped outside. Even the other security personnel later admitted they could feel it too. A heaviness pressing down on everything, like the entire ranch was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Halfway through the sweep, Dragon radioed in with something unusual. His voice wasn't panicked, not yet, but it carried an edge the team wasn't accustomed to hearing from him. "Do you copy? I'm getting movement near Sector C, but it's not tripping any of the ground sensors." The command team immediately checked the monitoring system. Dragon was absolutely right. No alerts, no thermal spikes, no motion detection, nothing registering on any equipment, but he kept whispering into the radio that something was pacing him through the trees, staying just barely out of direct sight. He said he could hear it clearly, Slow, deliberate steps, the sound of boots crunching on dirt, the soft push and snap of branches being moved aside. But the thermal drone circling overhead showed only Dragon's heat signature, nothing else. Without warning or explanation, he stopped answering the radio entirely. The command trailer erupted with noise, everyone shouting, scrambling, trying desperately to reach him. By the time the rapid response team arrived at the far corner of the property, they found Dragon standing perfectly still beside the old cottonwood tree near the ravine. His flashlight hung loosely in his hand, beam pointed uselessly at the ground. His pupils were massively dilated despite the bright lights now surrounding him. His breathing was shallow and rapid, like someone who had just witnessed something that shattered their understanding of reality. One of the crew members called his name repeatedly. Dragon didn't react at all. It wasn't until Thomas physically grabbed his shoulder and shook him that Dragon finally snapped out of whatever trance held him, gasping desperately like someone who'd been held underwater for too long. When they frantically asked what had happened, what he'd seen out there in the darkness, he didn't answer coherently. He just kept shaking his head violently, whispering over and over, "You didn't see it. You didn't see what was standing there." The team searched the entire area methodically. No footprints in the soft earth, no thermal traces lingering, no broken branches, absolutely nothing that could explain the absolute terror still trembling through Dragon's body. But when they later reviewed Dragon's body cam footage, something even more deeply unsettling emerged from the recording. At the exact moment Dragon stopped responding to radio calls, the microphone picked up a faint clicking noise in the background, completely unnatural. Not an animal sound, not machinery, something else entirely. Something that seemed to be responding directly to his presence. Then underneath the clicking, barely audible, a low, distorted whisper emerged. Audio technicians tried desperately to isolate the sound, filter it, enhance it, understand its origin. But the deeper they analyzed the waveform, the stranger it became. The pattern wasn't consistent with any known human voice. It wasn't mechanical interference. It existed somewhere in between, something that shouldn't be possible. When they showed Dragon the isolated audio clip, he refused to listen to it. After the terrifying incident at the cottonwood tree, Dragon attempted to return to his normal work routine as if nothing significant had happened, but the crew immediately noticed something had fundamentally changed. He was more guarded than ever before, more restless, constantly looking over his shoulder, and for the first time since joining the team years ago, Dragon started keeping critical information off the official record. It began when he insisted on reviewing all overnight surveillance footage completely alone, arriving hours before the rest of the team each morning. At first, nobody questioned this behavior. They assumed he was simply trying to make sense of his recent experiences, searching for patterns or explanations. But then the system logs revealed something deeply odd and concerning. Several files had been accessed, viewed multiple times, and then manually copied into a heavily encrypted folder under Dragon's personal login credential, footage that was suddenly no longer accessible to anyone else on the team, including Brandon Fugel himself. When confronted about this unusual behavior, Dragon brushed it off dismissively as routine security archiving, standard protocol for sensitive material. But the explanation didn't sit right with anyone. He had never done anything like this before in all his years on the property, and he certainly had never locked the investigative team out of potentially crucial data. Then came the night that truly alarmed everyone. Brandon Fugel himself flew in urgently from Salt Lake City, responding to a private message Dragon had sent him directly, bypassing all normal communication channels. The cameras caught their silhouettes inside the command trailer late that night, voices deliberately muted, door firmly locked from the inside. No one on the crew ever learned what Dragon showed Brandon during that secret meeting, but when Brandon finally emerged hours later, he looked visibly rattled, shaken in a way the ranch had never affected him before despite years of bizarre occurrences. The only real clue came from the drone operator, who later swore under oath that he saw Dragon carefully carrying a small metal case out to his personal truck later that evening, something he had retrieved from the restricted storage room where only the highest level evidence was kept under lock and key. Whatever was contained inside that case, Dragon handled it with extreme care, placing it gently on the passenger seat as if it were fragile or dangerous, and then drove off the property without explaining anything to anyone. The next morning when he returned, Dragon was pale, visibly exhausted, and absolutely refusing to discuss where he had gone or what he had done with the contents of that case. But the change in him was unmistakable and deeply troubling. Dragon had always been strict, intense, occasionally paranoid about security, but now he was something else entirely. He was genuinely afraid, not of intruders or trespassers or even the unknown phenomena. He was terrified of something specific, something the ranch had shown him, something he had locked in that metal case, something he desperately feared would change everything if it ever became public knowledge. And from that day forward, Dragon stopped trusting the ranch's monitoring systems entirely. He stopped trusting the investigation's methodology and conclusions. And worst of all, he stopped trusting the crew members he had worked alongside for years. The night everything finally fell apart began quietly enough. The team was gathered in the command center, carefully reviewing anomalies from the previous night's investigation, when one of the central monitors suddenly flickered without warning, just for a single second, barely noticeable. But in that brief moment, the screen displayed something that sent ice through everyone's veins. A frame that absolutely should not exist anywhere in their footage. On the monitor, clear as day, was an image showing a silhouette standing directly behind Dragon in footage recorded the previous night. Tall, unnaturally thin, completely featureless, and Dragon had never reported seeing anyone or anything during that patrol. When Dragon walked into the command center moments later and immediately saw the frozen image still displayed on the screen, he went completely rigid. Every muscle in his body tensed. For several long seconds, he didn't even appear to breathe. "That wasn't there," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Travis stepped forward carefully, studying both the screen and Dragon's reaction. "Dragon, that figure was standing directly behind you in this footage. Are you seriously telling us you didn't see anything unusual during this patrol?" "No," Dragon snapped defensively, but the crack in his voice completely betrayed him. He was lying, or he was in denial, or something far worse. Then the command center radios suddenly hissed with harsh static. Everyone in the room turned toward the speakers simultaneously. A voice whispered through the interference, broken and distant, seemingly impossible to pinpoint or identify. At first, it sounded like random interference, atmospheric noise, radio bounce. Then, unmistakably, crystal clear despite the static, it formed a single word: Brian. The entire team immediately looked at Dragon. His real name, his birth name. Only a small handful of people in his entire life ever called him that. Everyone on the ranch knew him exclusively as Dragon. The radio crackled again, louder this time. The whisper stretched and distorted, taking on an unnatural quality, almost mocking in its tone as it repeated his name slowly. Brian. Dragon stood completely frozen, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "That's not normal interference," Travis said quietly, stating the obvious that everyone was thinking. Dragon didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He just stared at the radio speaker, breathing hard through clenched teeth, looking like he was holding back either rage or panic or both. Then the whisper returned one final time, clearer than before, and every single hair on the back of Dragon's neck visibly stood up. Two words that would haunt him forever. "Behind you." Dragon spun around so violently and so fast that he knocked over an expensive equipment chair, sending it crashing to the floor. Nothing was there. The space behind him was completely empty, but the precise moment he turned, the entire command center's temperature dropped at least 20 degrees in seconds. People's breath became visible. The monitoring cameras flickered erratically, and then the same silhouette from the frozen footage appeared again, but this time on a live feed broadcasting in real time, standing in the exact spot where Dragon had been positioned just seconds before. When Dragon saw his own image on the screen with that thing standing where he'd just been, he whispered something that absolutely no one on the crew had ever heard from him before in all their years working together. "I'm done." And for the first time in the entire recorded history of the show, Dragon turned and walked out of the command center without completing a security lockdown protocol. Dragon didn't return to the command center that night. He stayed outside alone, pacing the dirt road toward the gate. Every few minutes he would stop, turn sharply, and stare into the tree line like he expected something to step out. The team watched from monitors, unsure whether to intervene. By sunrise, Dragon was sitting on his truck's tailgate, shoulders slumped, staring at the ground. When Travis approached, Dragon didn't look up. "It's not the ranch," he muttered. "It's me." Travis frowned. "What does that mean?" Dragon took a long breath. "This place doesn't follow you. It chooses you, and something out there chose me a long time ago." He explained that before the show ever aired, before Brandon bought the ranch, something appeared to him on the West Ridge. A shimmering distortion that moved without sound. He never filed a report, never told anyone. "It watched me," he whispered, like it already knew everything about me. The team listened in stunned silence. "And now it's back," he said. "It's following me again." When the crew prepared for the next investigation, Dragon didn't suit up. He walked to Brandon's truck, dropped his security badge on the hood, and said only one sentence: "If I stay here, It won't stop. He climbed into his truck and drove toward the gate. The cameras caught one final shot in his rearview mirror. His face pale, eyes fixed on the mesa behind him. 1 week after Dragon drove off Skinwalker Ranch for the final time, Brandon Fugel quietly confirmed what everyone already knew. Dragon had officially stepped away. No contract dispute, no salary negotiation. He left because something wasn't just observing him anymore. It was calling him by name. But leaving didn't end it. According to those who've seen him since, Dragon's life has become unrecognizable. He lives alone now, far from Utah, in a location he refuses to reveal. Friends say he's reclusive, distrustful of electronics, paranoid about being watched. He checks windows obsessively. He sleeps with lights on. He refuses to discuss the ranch. One former crew member reached him by phone last year. Dragon answered but said only 3 words before hanging up. It's still here. Others report he's moved multiple times, always at night, always without warning, like he's running from something that won't let go. The tragedy of Bryant Arnold isn't that he left Skinwalker Ranch. It's that part of the ranch left with him. And no matter how far he runs, whatever chose him that night on the West Ridge is still watching, still waiting, still calling his name in the dark.